Were you awake when this happened, or were you sleeping?
Sleeping, but I woke up myself.
Oh yeah? And when you woke...
And he put a gun on my mom and dad's head.
Someone came into that house believing fire, fear, and silence would wipe the whole night away.
What happened from the beginning last night?
I was in my craft room, and the TV was on, and I heard a noise, like something fall down. I look up, I saw him.
I thought she was talking about the people who had gotten to the house, and I said, it's okay, they'll find them. And she goes, no, Joe is gone. They killed him.
He would sit here and say that it was me and my brother who did this and planned this. I feel like...
Let me ask you something. Do you know what a lie is? A lie?
Yeah.
What is it?
It's when you don't tell the truth and you do something bad.
And what happens when you tell a lie?
You get in trouble.
Before the story even has a villain, it has a crime scene. South Florida news cameras are rolling. Police are already telling the public that a father and son have been charged in the murder of a local professor. The name is Joseph Morrissey, a Nova Southeastern University researcher. At first glance, it sounds like another home invasion, but then one detail changes everything. Joseph's wife and little boy made it out alive. That means this is not just a murder case. It is a failed erasure. Someone came into that house believing fire, fear, and silence would wipe the whole night away. Instead, the scene starts talking almost immediately, and once that happens, the clock starts running backward toward the men police say planned it.
Police in South Florida have charged a father and son in last week's murder of a local professor.
Now here's the part that hits like a punch. The killer thought no one would be left to tell the story. A husband is dead, a house is burning, a mother is tied up, and somewhere inside that smoke-filled home is a 5-year-old boy who should have been too young to matter to this case. But he mattered. He mattered because he woke up. He mattered because he listened. He mattered because when his mother needed help, he moved. In true crime stories, grown men usually control the room. In this one, the smallest person in the house breaks the killer's plan without even knowing it. And that is why this case stays with people. Not because the crime was loud, but because survival was quiet. To understand how brutal this night became, you have to see what was being attacked. Joseph Morrissey was not some shadowy figure with a secret life. Public reporting described him as a respected Nova Southeastern University professor doing scientific research, including cancer work. Colleagues remembered him as quiet, passionate, and deeply liked. At home, he was a husband and father. Court records identify the family in that house as Joseph, his wife Linda K. Morrissey, and their son Patrick, who was just 5 years old.
He became very well liked. The faculty just embraced him. Very quiet individual. Very passionate about his research.
The motive, according to the Florida Supreme Court and multiple local reports, started with a landlord-tenant fight. Randy W. Tundidor and his family were renting from the Morrisseys. Tundidor had been deducting repair costs from his rent, and that led to a dispute. Then came a letter dated April 2nd, 2010. Joseph Morrissey informed Tundidor that he was violating the lease. Just days before the murder, Joseph had sent notice tied to default and eviction issues. In simple terms, the relationship had turned into a threat to Randy Tundidor's living situation and pride. And that seems to be where the case begins to shift from money trouble into something darker, rage mixed with humiliation, the kind that wants to punish the person setting a boundary.
Have you ever had any dealings with Mr. Morrissey other than being a tenant?
Yeah, well, right now I'm suing him because I fell down the stairs in the house because of lack of repairs. He stopped talking to me because of the lawsuit. When I met him, he seemed like a gentleman.
What time did you come home last night?
I was home most of the night.
Did you call anybody?
Actually, my son called me. He needed money, but I won't help him.
Which son?
Randy Jr. First off, he's wanted by the law. Secondly, he's a crack addict.
Randy Tundidor did not react like a man ready to solve a problem. He reacted like a man who wanted control back at any cost. He told his son that Joseph was evicting him and destroying his family. Another line police tied to him, that the landlord had messed with the wrong person and wanted to put them on the streets. Instead of asking how to fix the lease problem, investigators say Tundidor started building a plan to punish the man he held responsible.
The reason? Prosecutors say the professor was also the Tundidor's landlord and about to evict them.
And then the planning gets cold. According to the Florida Supreme Court opinion, Randy Tundidor gathered a loaded silver .380 caliber gun, zip tie restraints, a screwdriver, a large knife, and walkie-talkies. That is not a burst of anger. That is a kit. Every item has a job: force, restraint, entry, communication, killing. The opinion says his son, Randy H. Tundidor Jr., armed himself with the gun and entered the Morrissey home through an open window. So before anyone inside even understood there was danger, the attack had already moved from thought to action. This is where the case becomes terrifying in a very specific way.
Randy Tundidor Jr. and his father, Randy Sr., are accused of killing Morrissey because he was trying to evict them. Both have also been charged with home invasion robbery, arson, and other charges.
Linda Morrissey later told jurors what the opening moments felt like from inside the house. NBC Miami reported her words. An armed intruder terrorized her and her husband, bound their hands and feet with zip ties, and made Joseph hop out of the room. She told the jury she heard the intruder's cruelty in plain language, recounting, "I don't care if I kill you." That line strips away any illusion that this was just a robbery gone wrong. The threat was already there from the start. The home had stopped being a home. It had become a controlled space, a stage where fear was being used like a weapon. And while Joseph and Linda were trying to stay alive, they were also trying to protect the one person in the house who had no idea why any of this was happening, their little boy, Patrick.
They say the suspect tied up the couple inside their home and set the kitchen on fire. Morrissey's wife and young son were able to escape unharmed.
One of the most haunting details came from Linda's testimony about Patrick. She said Joseph told him, "Please, please, just pretend you're sleeping." That is such a small sentence, but it carries the whole weight of a parent in crisis. Joseph understood the rule of that moment. If the child stays quiet, maybe he stays alive. So now picture the house through the parent's eyes. Their hands are tied. A gun is in play. The intruder is moving them around, and their son is close enough to hear things no child should hear. That is where the emotional force of this case really sits, not only in what the killers did, but in how the family was still trying to protect each other while trapped. Even under total control, Joseph's instinct was still father first. Then the attackers forced the next move. Joseph and Linda were made to go to an ATM, where Linda was able to withdraw only $500. That detail is important because it shows how the crime kept stretching. This was not over once the intruders had control of the house. They pushed the couple out into public, forced a cash withdrawal, and then brought them back. It is one of the clearest signs that money alone was never the whole point. If it were just a robbery, the thieves could have taken the cash and fled, but they returned to the house with their victims still under force.
Police say Morrissey and his wife were confronted by a robber who took them to an ATM.
Once back inside, the last layer of hope starts to fall away. The men returned to the home, tied up Linda, and Joseph was stabbed to death. The Florida Supreme Court adds a more chilling detail. Randy Tundidor attempted to shoot Joseph, but the gun jammed.
The Tundidors stand accused of breaking into a Nova Southeastern University professor's home, kidnapping the professor and his wife, and ultimately stabbing the professor to death.
Randy Tundidor then stabbed Joseph multiple times in the stomach area, head, and neck, while Joseph begged for his life. Linda told jurors she heard her husband pleading, "Please, please don't kill me. I have kids." There is nothing dramatic to add to that. It is already the most human sentence in the case. A man trying to live, a father reminding the attacker that there are children tied to this moment, and still, it did not stop. This is where the case crosses from calculated invasion into plain cruelty. Joseph was not killed in a burst of confusion. He was killed while pleading. And then came the part meant to erase everything. Gasoline was spread through the house, and a fire was lit near Joseph while Linda and Patrick were still inside. The attackers were accused of setting the home on fire before leaving. This is the step that makes the title of this story make sense. The men did not just want Joseph dead. The evidence suggests they wanted the house turned into a grave and a crime scene at the same time. Fire destroys blood, objects, timing, memory. Fire also kills witnesses who cannot free themselves. So when the flames start, the killers are effectively betting that nobody will be left to speak clearly about what happened. That is the bet that failed.
Were you awake when this happened, or were you sleeping?
Sleeping, but I woke up myself.
Oh, yeah? And when you...
And he put a gun on my mom and dad's head.
Because Patrick woke up, and according to Linda's testimony, Patrick did exactly what his mother asked him to do. Patrick, you have to be a big boy. Help mommy. Get the scissors. And he did. Patrick brought her the scissors that let her cut through her bindings. Think about the size of that moment. A child in a burning house, a mother tied up, a father dying, and the only move left is a 5-year-old boy following instructions in the middle of chaos. There is no part of that feels fair, but it is real, and it is the reason the plan to leave no witness behind collapsed. Patrick was not just present, he became the hinge between death and escape.
Morrissey's wife and young son were able to escape unharmed.
Once Linda got free, the nightmare spilled outside. Neighbor David Strickland testified he and his wife heard screams, then a knock at the door. When they opened it, 5-year-old Patrick said, "My daddy's on fire." Linda was then seen in the street, wrists tied, saying they had been robbed. That single line from Patrick is one of the most unforgettable in the entire case because it sounds like exactly what it was. A child trying to report horror with the few words he had. No polished language, no adult framing, just the truth as it looked to him.
Citation, police department, can help you?
Requesting a dispatch on a residential fire alarm.
The resident's last name?
Morrissey, M-O-R.
When detectives arrived, they were not walking into a neat scene with one easy answer. Investigators had wondered why the wife and son were left alive. That tells you something about how strange the aftermath looked. Joseph was dead. The home had been burned, but 2 witnesses were still here, and that changes everything in an investigation. It means the case is not built only on ash and debris. It is built on memory, sequence, voice, and surviving fear. Police also had the structure of the crime to work with: a forced ATM trip, restraints, a fire, and a very personal connection between victim and suspect. Once those pieces start lining up, a home invasion starts looking less random and more targeted. That shift is what pulls the case toward Randy Tundidor.
What happened from the beginning last night?
I was in my craft room, and the TV was on, and I heard a noise, like something fall down. I look up, I saw him.
The arrests came fast enough to show investigators believed this was not some unknown drifter case. Police arrested Randy Tundidor Sr. and Randy Tundidor Jr. and charged them with murdering Joseph during the home invasion. The motive, again, circled back to the eviction dispute. Public reports also said Linda later identified Randy Jr. in a lineup and said she was 85% sure he was the robber who killed her husband. And there is a psychological pattern here that jurors often understand right away. Once someone decides a private grievance justifies violence, every later choice feels to them like fixing a wrong. The law, of course, sees it for what it is: premeditation. Then the physical evidence started filling in the holes. A gas container found in the home carried a fingerprint matched to Randy Tundidor Jr. Items from the Morrissey home were later found at Randy Tundidor Sr.'s business, including a possible murder weapon described as a 15-inch knife. Court records also described additional items tied to the planning and attack. This is where cases harden. Motive gives detectives direction. Evidence gives prosecutors structure. A can, a knife, restraints, statements, movement. All of it starts pushing in the same direction. And when different kinds of evidence all point at the same people, the defense has less room to turn the story into coincidence.
Well-known and well-respected criminal defense lawyer Jim Lewis under the bus, claiming Lewis, who at one point represented father and son, instructed his clients to destroy crucial evidence: the gun used to rob and intimidate Nova Southeastern University professor Joe Morrissey and his family.
But one of the most damaging threads did not come from a lab. It came from inside the family. Sean Tundidor told police his father had confessed, though he later denied those statements. Another public clip captures a chilling moment tied to that family pressure. In the clip, a speaker describes turning on the news with his brother Randy, seeing the plantation murder report, following him outside, and asking the question that had suddenly become unavoidable. "Bro, tell me you had nothing to do with that." The answer was not comfort. It was a threat. The speaker says his brother told him to shut up because he would kill him if he had to. That is not normal fear. That is the panic of a person who knows silence is now part of survival.
And I don't know, family, you get instincts. You're not stupid. You know your family. You know what I'm saying? So I walked out in the back and I said, "Bro, tell me you had nothing to do with that." And he says, "I didn't." And I said, "So what's up?" And he says, "Go talk to Dad." So I walked upstairs and I said, "Pa, so you seen the news?" He said, you need to shut up. He said, because I'll kill you if I have to.
Eventually, the case turned in a way many father-son murder cases do. One son became the state's path to the father. Randy Tundidor Jr. pleaded guilty to reduced charges, including second-degree murder, in exchange for avoiding the death penalty and testifying against his father. Sun Sentinel's short video says his testimony could send his own father to death row. That plea does not make Jr. harmless. It means he was inside the crime and useful to prosecutors. In courtroom terms, that is explosive and messy at the same time. The defense can attack his motives. The prosecution can say, nobody knows the plan better than the person who helped carry it out. Once Junior talks, the private version of the night is no longer private.
The judge, Cynthia Imperato, has made a decision, and that is to not make a decision at this point. She is going to go through all of the documents that she has received, listen to the testimony one more time, and then have her ruling.
At trial, prosecutors laid the story out as a horror story. They argued Randy Tundidor Sr. planned the attack because he was about to be evicted. Jurors heard about the break-in, the ATM trip, the restraints, the stabbing, the fire, and the little boy who helped his mother get free. Neighbors testified. Crime scene evidence came in. The defense pushed back by saying Junior was the killer and that the elder Tundidor was physically incapable of committing the crime the way the state described. That is a classic defense move in a two-defendant case. Narrow the violence to the younger, more active body and break the chain to the older mastermind. But once planning, motive, testimony, and physical evidence start linking together, that kind of split defense argument gets much harder to hold.
Second day of a life or death hearing for Randy Tundidor, the man convicted of killing a Nova Southeastern University professor.
And a jury has already recommended the death penalty, but his friends and family are arguing for life in prison.
The jury convicted Randy Tundidor Sr. of first-degree murder and related charges. The Florida Supreme Court later summarized the counts: first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, armed kidnapping, armed burglary, armed robbery, and arson, while vacating 2 attempted felony murder counts on appeal for double jeopardy reasons. But the core result stayed in place. The murder conviction stood. The state, and later the High Court, both treated this as a deliberate, planned killing tied to a home invasion and an eviction grievance.
A 23-year-old plantation murder suspect has offered up testimony that could send his own father to death row.
Then came sentencing, the part where a courtroom tries to translate horror into punishment. Public reporting shows the jury recommended death, and Local 10's hearing clip shows how serious that phase became. The reporter says it was a life-or-death hearing for Randy Tundidor, that the jury had already recommended the death penalty, and that the final decision was being weighed after extensive evidence and testimony. Randy Tundidor Sr. was sentenced to death, and that death sentence was affirmed on appeal. Junior, by contrast, received a 40-year sentence after his plea.
On the 24th of October, it is rare, though, that a judge overturns what a jury recommends, which is, in this case, that Randy Tundidor Sr. die by lethal injection.
But the case does not really end in a sentence. A post-verdict interview with Kay Morrissey makes that painfully clear. She said she and Patrick still lived with flashbacks, triggers, grief, and questions that did not go away. She described having to answer her son's whys and what-ifs, saying some days it felt like her heart was on the floor and she had to pick it up just to respond. And she called Patrick her hero.
You're like a hero.
My mom said.
So when people remember the Morrissey family case, they remember the cruelty, yes, but they also remember the failure inside that cruelty. Randy Tundidor, according to the courts, turned an eviction fight into a planned home invasion, kidnapping, robbery, murder, and arson. He and his son forced a family through terror, and Joseph Morrissey lost his life trying to survive the night. But the plan did not fully work. Linda got out. Patrick got the scissors. Neighbors heard. Police built the case. A son turned witness. A jury believed what the evidence showed. And that is the final truth here. The killers thought fire would end the story. Instead, a 5-year-old survived. A mother spoke. And the case lived long enough to put the truth on the record for good.